Hey Villa fam, you're back with Two Village Girls for another episode of Honest Conversations. I'm Serena.
I'm Angie.
As we continue talking about growth and change from the lenses of childcare workers, this week we will be telling you about education. So, as you guys may know by now, Angie and I both work in different childcare fields. So, education is a big deal to us, especially like the younger ages.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's important across all ages, but we particularly deal with like 5 and under.
Yeah,
So helping them grow and thrive is important.
absolutely.
And there's so many things that go on in the school setting that parents may not be aware of that might like help or hinder your child. And knowing about these things can help you guys like move forward and push your child in the right direction. Some of those things include like Common Core standards. Some of these things include like Common Core standards, standardized testing, summer learning and homeschooling, and just like the individualized things that kids need to learn, like gross and fine motor skills, study habits, and a big one is like STEM, because that falls into a lot of different activities.
First, we're going to talk about Common Core standards and basically just give our opinions on it. I was raised in Baltimore, so I went to Baltimore City School. So, Serena, did you go to Baltimore City School?
I went to,
Or public schools or private schools or.
yeah, I was in public school for my entire education career. And most of it was spent in Baltimore. I spent like a year or two in Georgia, but all of it was public school regardless. Like one of the big things about the Common Core standards is like that concept of no child left behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, Now working in the childcare field, like on paper it sounds good, but in reality there are so many things that I feel like we are letting kids like slide by with
Yeah, absolutely.
that aren't benefiting the kid in the name of no child left behind.
Yeah.
Like if we're pushing them forward without giving them the tools they need.
Yeah. Or at least making sure they have the tools that they need. They just move. Tough kids, teachers gotta work with some tough kids. And sometimes they don't want to work with them the next year. So they just like push them forward just so they won't, like somebody else can deal with it. The next teacher can deal with it. Maybe they can figure out and be able to help them. But no, it's not like that. And I know a lot of times it's not even a teacher fault because as we talked about, there's a lot of kids that teachers have to deal with every day, like 20 kids on that one teacher sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about high school to all of that. Like they don't have that time to just sit and focus, like give that one-on-one time with that a specific student that may need it.
Oh, absolutely.
That no child left behind to me is just trash because it's just like you need to make sure that you're like the child is able to move forward because the next grade is actually like a next step in their education. Like you grow off of things that you learn. You go to each grade, get higher, get more educated, learn more things. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, you just build off of things you already know. Like if you're sending them forward without them knowing anything, like what are they really building?
It's like you can't run before you learn how to walk.
Mm-hmm.
And so pushing them forward when they haven't learned how to walk and expecting them to run furthers them behind. But simply labeling it as, oh, no child's left behind, we move them forward. Like you're not doing a service to that child if they now have to catch up on 2 different levels as opposed to
just the one.
Yeah. That's a big deal for me because I feel like even at a young age, like I work as a para and I think that I do the best that I can with my kids, and seeing like me being there, I feel like there needs to be more of me, more paras in the schools, because these kids, like seeing them grow, seeing them benefit from just having that one-on-one time, like half an hour a day, it makes a difference. I had one student of mine who came in this year, like it's a COVID year, so half of her pre-K experience was hybrid, and hybrid is hard for pre-K students in general because they're not meant to sit for hours on end in front of a screen. So she came back in person, not knowing much of her alphabet, not knowing much of her numbers. But for about 5 weeks, every morning I was working with her. She knows her alphabet. She knows how to count forwards, backwards, like just seeing that difference. It just makes me feel like there needs to be more of that one-to-one. Like these larger classes, it doesn't benefit them more than like that personal relationship, those one-on-one teacher moments.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I'm definitely a one-on-one person, or
Mm-hmm.
I definitely like the one-on-one because like when I was in school, like all through school, like teachers teach differently, and like a lot of times I learn more like when somebody is working with me just one-on-one, like when you're talking to everybody like in the class. There's a lot of times when like me, I was shy and I didn't want to raise my hand and ask that question. And those are the times where it just feels like you're not really learning enough because you're scared to ask the question, and then there's also not one-on-one time, so it's like you never will get the opportunity. That's just for me speaking for my shy people that's afraid to talk in class. But yeah, so then you kind of feel like behind because you don't get that extra help that you really need. Then you just sit there and try to figure it out on your own. That's what
Mm-hmm.
that's where I got that habit from in college, teaching myself.
I mean, you got to do what you got to do.
But yeah, it's
And
definitely not beneficial at all. Even with my education going through, like from middle school to high school, classes I should have failed, but teachers rather just, pass you. Like, I mean, I know a lot of my teachers just seem like the good in me. Like, they know that I'm a smart person and I like to learn and stuff like that. So they like move me forward. They didn't want to see me fail. But
mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, I feel like I needed that time to like go back and actually either learn the material over or get more help.
It's like in college. One of the big things that everyone says is it's not a matter of how long it takes you to complete college, is that you do it.
Yeah, true.
And it's acceptable. Like having that standard 12 years of grade school, I feel like the same standard could be
Yeah.
like used, because it doesn't matter how long it takes as long as you're pursuing it, because it's not a race.
Yeah.
It's just getting where we need to be. We
And
don't
it's
judge adults for not getting through a standard 4 year college
yeah.
in more than 4 years. So why are we putting this pressure on children and forcing them forward? We don't force adults forward in college
Yeah.
either.
And we also like talk a lot on a developmental standpoint. So a lot of times like we literally aren't developmentally ready to move forward to a different grade. I'm talking probably for like little kids, how they get pushed to kindergarten and then to first grade. Some kids aren't ready for that. Like you say, some kids don't even know their ABCs, but here they are still going to first grade not knowing their ABCs. So now they're behind.
Yeah,
But y'all push them forward. Like Serena said, that's not giving them the tools that they need.
I agree with that developmental standpoint too.
Since COVID happened, like even like the kids that did do bad, like didn't do a lot of work, they still like pushing them to their next grade. Like nobody
Yeah.
is failing, and like I don't know, that just kind of hurt my soul because I know from like my nieces and nephews, I know that a lot of their work was not completed this school year. Like even when they was like online and stuff like that, they were
Mm-hmm.
most of the time they was not getting their work done. To me, that's just not a good idea to like move them forward. Like yes, this was a tough year for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but if they need that to do that year over again, that's just really what they need to do.
Yeah, who's to judge these children? They went through, like, we as adults had to go through COVID and process things. The
Yeah,
same goes for
it's the
these
same
kids.
thing. Yeah.
In the context of Common Core standards, there are certain subjects that, like, are controversial almost,
Mhm.
like music, language, arts, STEM,
Mhm.
like these things that have been talks about, like, cutting these because we don't need them as much and what have you. But in reality, all of these different things are especially needed when it comes to children growing up, because
Absolutely.
part of growing is learning and creating.
Mhm.
And if we push children on sitting behind a desk, computing numbers and
Yeah.
writing words down all day, every day, we're not really feeding their minds.
True.
They can follow directions, but can they create ideas and think for themselves and expand
Mhm.
and just be themselves? Taking these things out of schools, or even considering taking them out of schools, isn't beneficial to these kids. In a preschool setting, this is their first experience with the outside world, and they
Mhm.
have to try everything.
Yeah, that's true. Some things can be switched in, the school system. Like I know like the STEM program should stay, but like how classes like we have geometry, we have algebra, calculus, like we have so many different types of math classes, but like in all honesty, like our generation found out like what do we really need all of that for in our future. Like if we have
Mm-hmm.
classes like tax classes, like how to do your taxes or
Yeah.
how to budget or like
Home ec.
those things you can like switch out and take out like all those math like requirements for math, like if that's not what they're really
Mm-hmm.
into their career, like career wise, or whatever, then why? Like, it doesn't need to be forced on us. Like, I get the
Yeah.
basic stuff, the basic, making sure you know how to do addition, subtraction, division, all of that, percentages and stuff like that. I get that. That's important. But like, people love math and they might go into that, but let them people
Mm-hmm.
go into that. Like, why do we have to?
Absolutely.
Especially in high school. But yeah.
Yeah. So that brings us into standardized testing, which is another big thing for the public school system, and like testing where you as like a child stand compared to all of your peers in existence, basically.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the concept of standardized testing is basically putting a label on you based on how you follow directions. I feel like it doesn't really reflect children or teenagers
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how much they know and understand, because it's a very computerized process. How would you put it in terms of standardized testing?
It's just trash to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get like testing and like just saying where an individual is, like,
Yeah, like progress.
yeah, see how they are.
Checking.
Yeah, I like the idea of making sure that the child is actually making progress
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. But like, what do they have? Like, standard testers make sure you get into that school, or
Yeah.
standardized test to make sure that you get to the next grade. A lot of people aren't test takers, so it's just,
Mm-hmm.
it puts more pressure onto that person.
Yeah.
And like, once you're under pressure doing something, who's gonna show good performance? Like, when they're like under pressure, under that type of pressure. So me with standardized testing, I was that one person that was just like, oh no, I don't like tests. Like, it just freaks me out.
Yeah.
This happened to me a couple times. Like, I could know everything. Like, I know this stuff. Going in there, sitting there, taking a test,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like,
Nope. Completely
yeah,
out of mind.
yeah. It is so like forced and timed and
Yeah.
routined and scheduled. Like, some classes you gotta have a quiz every Friday. Some tests, like the what's the SAT test. You gotta take those a couple times sometimes to get a good score to get to college.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so many tests, like, just to see,
If you qualify under some
basically.
like higher powers decision on whether you're smart enough.
And basically, yeah. And it should
Um,
be on performance. How have they done? Like, have they grown? Have they learned? Have they achieved anything since the beginning of the school year? Like, those the things.
Absolutely. And it doesn't offer in doing these tests, like if you take a test in class, it lets the teacher know where you are. But if you take these standardized tests, you don't get to go back and see where you made mistakes.
Mm-mm,
You don't get to
they
learn
don't.
from these standardized tests. It's a one and done, and in most cases don't you have to like request your own scores? They don't even tell you how you did. You just have to blindly
Sometimes.
send them to colleges or anyone else that needs to look at your
Yeah.
scores and hope that you did well.
I mean, like, sometimes I do understand with like getting into school, the people there, at the school looking at, the different student scores or stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I know they have like certain expectations for people, and obviously you don't want like somebody who has bad grades. They want somebody who did good on that test. But at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, like I said, taking tests for some people could be real bad for them. Like, you have to
Yeah.
look at like their whole school year performance. Did they have good grades throughout the school year? Or
Mm-hmm.
you have to look at their tests just to see where they're at, when you can look at their grades from the whole school year
Absolutely.
instead of looking at that one test.
One thing I was fortunate for going through college was that I wasn't judged based on my like standard test scores.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was able to get into college and they offered me help upon entering. Like,
Yeah.
I see you had issues with this. There's this supplemental math class to get you on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
I see you have a pretty good grasp on writing. However,
Mm-hmm.
if you'd like to take this
Yeah.
extra writing class, like giving me those options so that I don't fall further behind in college.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you can make these like standardized testing more beneficial to everybody. Going back to that no child left behind concept,
Yeah.
these are the tools that we can offer to bring everyone to the same page instead of praising some and then just pushing everyone else along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, our school did the how the math placement test, how they gave us tests
Mm-hmm.
but they placed us in a math class that was like based on what we knew from that test. Like tests like those are tests. Like that's a test that's looking at where we are, in that subject. I feel like a lot of times teachers don't give students the right like study tools that they need. Like
Mm-hmm.
they'll say like go home and study because you got a test tomorrow, but how? I feel like me and Serena, we question that a lot in college. Like, you want us to study, but how? How do we study? What are we supposed to do to study? Like, do we just read it over for memorization over and over again?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do we do? It's really no right way to sit there and study without having to be up literally all night.
Yeah. And like you said, there's no right way to study. There are different ways people study.
Yeah.
Some people need a hands on, some people need to read it over
Mhm.
and memorize it. And then it's just how is the test being presented? Like simply knowing
Mhm.
that was a big
Yeah.
deal for me growing up. It's like if I know what standard
Mhm.
like format the test will be in, I'll know how best to prepare. But like all of that's kept a secret because they don't want us to be like too prepared, I guess. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Why was that like? I know in college they did tell us, but I feel like in high school a lot they didn't. They just gave us a test. I know in
Yeah.
college they did was like, it's gonna be 25 multiple choice in the
Yeah.
writing portion. They told us, but I
Yeah.
don't remember them telling us in high school. That's a good point. But that did help a lot because a lot of times you have to really study more if you're going to write. So you
Mm-hmm.
want to study more, but multiple choice you can like cancel out some options and do some like little stuff.
Yeah.
But we used to study a lot with like index cards. We used to just quiz each other a lot and do things like that to study. I feel like we just what we do, read, take notes.
Yeah.
That was basically our way of studying. That helped. I feel like one thing that we could do was like to study what you learned that day instead of like we did study, but I feel like we studied because the test was coming. But if
Mm-hmm.
you go home and just refresh your mind about whatever you learned that day and
Yeah.
do that daily, like every day you come home from school and stuff, I feel like the more you do it, the more the stuff will really like stick there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just thinking about it now. But I feel like that's a good if we go back to college, a good way to study.
If you mean when we go back to college, but that's another story for another time, y'all. So, with all these standards and testing and No Child Left Behind, that brings us into summer learning or summer school. And the first thing I want to say about summer school is it's not bad to have to do summer school or to choose to do summer school because in my school's case, it's optional. You can join in unless you're like recommended to be there or need to be there to move forward. Simply getting that extra like learning in is not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's not. It can be beneficial too. Also, like it has something for kids to do like over the summer. You know how they have them 3 little months where they're not learning anything. They just home.
Yeah.
Sometimes going to summer school could be beneficial because it still keeps them learning.
Yeah. It keeps their minds engaged in
Yeah.
something. I think summer learning should be talked about more because growing up, like all I'd ever hear was that it was for those that were failing, it was for
Mhm.
those that were bad,
Yeah.
or,
Me too.
people that didn't do right in school. But in reality, like, had I had the option to go and just like brush up on some things during that time, I would have loved to do that because I'd come into school. One subject I struggle in, even today, is still math. And if I'd had the opportunity to just go back in and catch up on some math that I didn't understand or that I missed, I would have loved that without the idea of being judged for having gone to summer school. Like, it's not
Mhm.
something we should be ashamed of because our education is important.
I don't know how big it is now, but I know when I was in school, summer school was definitely not looked at
Mm-hmm.
as a good thing.
And let's sidestep for a second. Let's talk about how much education is like a taboo, like
Mm.
being smart. Like, why? Like, there's so many issues that people face for being the quote unquote nerd, the geek,
Yeah.
the person that loves math, the like smart kid in the class that just sits in the back. Like, being that person, seeking out that education, going to summer school, like that kind of stuff, that's not ever something you should be ashamed of. It's just we embrace these people even today because we see how hard they've worked and we
Yeah.
see where we wish we were.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's just, sometimes we just kind of wish we was them. Not them, but they're like,
Yeah.
smart, intelligent, all that. Because we are smart, but sometimes, people just, they into that. They
Mm-hmm.
into that math. They deep inside the math. And they know it. Like, you can ask them a question, they ready to answer. It take,
Mm-mm.
like, I love math, y'all, but it takes me some time to
Nope.
get complete a math question. But some people can do it real fast because they love it. It's
Well,
definitely not a bad thing. We should really encourage them because, shoot, they doing the dang on thing.
absolutely. Back on summer learning. I really love how my school's doing the summer learning. It just expands so many things. Their social skills. They still learn all different subjects in that summer learning program. They still get that like math, that STEM, those arts and sciences, and of course writing and everything. And I feel like it gets them excited to come back to school even. There's just so many opportunities that are wasted because we're too afraid to be labeled really.
Yeah.
So moving into our area of expertise, quote unquote, is that early learning and transitioning to the next level, which is in a public school setting, in most cases, kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do or recommend for people that have young children right now?
I feel like one big thing is just like making sure that they are ready.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes kids aren't ready to like move forward to big. Well, I'm gonna just call it big kid school, but it is kindergarten. Sometimes they're not ready to move on to kindergarten, and I know it's an age limit. You ought to be like five,
Yeah.
4 or 5, and sometimes that 4 year old may not be ready. They may not be ready until they're 5, and that's not a bad thing. But you know,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of parents don't want their kids to be behind like it's starting school late, so they think their kids will be behind because their kids started school late. But if they really aren't ready developmentally, then I shouldn't be forced to go. That's one big transition. Make sure they're ready.
The task at hand is to help your child through school. And if helping them means not pushing them forward in that no child left behind stage, then there's no shame. There's no reason to feel like there's something wrong. These kids depend on us. And if we're telling them that we aren't happy with them because they're not where they are expected to be by public school standards, who are public school standards to put this label on this child without offering anything else? Know who you can talk to in your school setting to get your child those things that they need, whether it's like a one-on-one specialist, an IEP, which is an individualized education plan, a behavior specialist, whatever your child might need in the school setting. Like these schools have them. And that's a big thing that bothers me is that these parents don't know these things. So like I'm working with some kids and I'm wondering like if I'm seeing certain behaviors or certain like delays on my end, then and these parents just don't know that they have resources at the school that can help them, or maybe it's just fear of putting that label on these children. I'm not really sure, but not using the tools that are available to you to help your child, you know. Another big thing is embracing play. Getting your kids ready is a lot about imagination and embracing play, giving them the opportunity to create on their own in an educational way, like simply letting them pick their own books that they want to read about, telling them to like make a story and then helping them write that story, you know, playing math games and different things. Like there are a lot of fun ways that you can interact with your child, or even siblings can interact with each other.
Yeah.
A lot of that early learning comes from play.
Absolutely. Homework, you know, I know kids hate homework, but
Mm-hmm.
homework can be good because sending homework home like after school, it just gives them like refreshers, and also give like sometimes it gives parents that time to like sit and learn what the children is learning, or sit and to know whatever the children is learning that day.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely important. Y'all know we work with younger kids, so
Yeah.
as long as it's like fun and interactive, and like the children are entertained with it, then I feel like it's very beneficial for them to have little homeworks, little ABCs or little 1 2 3s. Like even my 2 year olds, they sometimes I gotta just listen to a YouTube song when they go home for homework. Like it don't have to be something big. And I know a lot of times we give homework, you know, just as a big class, but sometimes the class ain't as like a lot of the kids aren't on the same page. So if you give homework out for addition, everybody in the class don't know how to count to 10. Why are you giving out addition? You can't give it to everybody. Your homework really has to be for that person, to be honest.
Absolutely. Cater to the child and not to the system, really. That's what it really comes down to, is making sure what's best for your child is being done. The education system overall is built on like societal standards and it's not built for the children. And like being in childcare, it's opened my eyes to that. So just kind of like I've been taking just like mental notes of things that like I've noticed and things that I want to change at some point in my career. That way we don't end up failing our future children or the future of society.
Yeah. That's true, because they are future, they're going to be like future doctors and lawyers and all of that.
Absolutely. Keep that in mind next time your child comes home with a bad grade or even a good grade. Just keep in mind the implications with these different things.
How you respond is important. Thanks for tuning in again to another episode with Two Village Girls. Please subscribe to our channel if you are new. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them down below. Also, go ahead and hit the bell to get notified when new videos drop. Please check out our Facebook and Instagram at Two Village Girls for updates and weekly inspiration. As always, we want to send you out with some positive vibes to get you through the rest of your week. This week's inspirational quote is by Edward Everett Hale, who says, I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And I will not let what I cannot do interfere with what I can do. Thanks, Villa fam. Bye.
Bye.